Salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. Definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. Okay, I hadn't heard of Dogman, but that might explain something. My neighbor has some country dogs, shepherd and cattle dog mix, shepherd and Dane, pit and rot. They love us and love playing with our city dogs when we're up there. They're not really scared of much. They have routinely killed coyote and wild dog. They run towards the fight. Last year we were hanging out one evening on the porch, and there was some distant dog howl sound. All three of the country dogs instantly cowered. They tucked their tail and got behind us by the wall. Craziest thing I had ever seen, visibly scared. The city dogs didn't know much better. It was unnerving. These country dogs don't even know what the inside of a house looks like, and they rushed into our house as soon as we opened the door. Only time they ever did that in 9 years. We put them in the laundry room that night, and they just laid there and didn't budge until the morning. And then they were fine. Dogman, Wolfman, one single dog noise caused this behavior, and like I mentioned, the country dogs kill coyote. And I've never seen them scared of anything. Today's second encounter. I was around 16. I left my grandparents' house during the middle of the day after lunch one summer. I was driving my old '78 Ford truck and saw a dog/wolf thing walking on 2 legs. It didn't pay me any mind, but then it realized that I had actually saw it. There was this incredulous look on its face, almost as if it wasn't used to being seen. It then stepped behind a tree, and I haven't seen it since. It wasn't a hulking creature at all. It was lithe and 6 feet-ish. It had an air of intelligence and a cunning look. I've never seen anything else like this since. Who knows, maybe the bread on that sandwich my grandma made me had ergot in it. Today's third encounter. In February of March of 1999, my wife and I were walking in our pasture and found some unusual tracks/impressions in the mud and snow. They were spaced about 6 or 7 feet apart, and they were alternating left and right. They consisted of 3 pads, each with a corresponding claw or nail or talon in the front. They were fairly large, and the pads were nearly as deep as my index finger was long. At first I thought perhaps our dog, a 60-pound mutt, may have been responsible. I had to walk back to our house to find any of her paw prints in the snow, but they were way too small and were a normal dog track with 4 pads with the claws in the front and a larger pad behind and centered. I didn't have a camera available, so I drew a sketch. I showed my sketch to the game warden in my area. I personally knew him, and he assured me it was just a dog track, even though they were alternating left to right, were 6 or 7 feet apart. had only 3 pads and claws, and looked nothing like a dog track. Years later, 2016, I was at the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, and had the opportunity to speak with a couple of people. I described everything just as I did and reproduced my sketch. None of them had seen anything like this before. However, one suggested it was just a dog. I don't know what made these tracks or impressions, but I never believed they were made by just a dog. Today's 4th encounter. Well, here goes. Last summer I was headed to Utah, and I was trying to make it to Salt Lake by noon the next day. I had refueled in Flagstaff and was on my way to Page, Arizona via Highway 89. I was about 39 minutes outside of Page on 89, which is a 2-lane road, and next to nothing to pull off. It's around 10:30, 11-ish, and I'm doing about 90. Nobody in sight. I see this coyote pass in front of my car, and I jerk the wheel because it's taking its good old fucking time, which is kind of odd. It was like it was almost wanting me to run it over. So now I'm really alert. About a half a mile up the road, I see something in the opposite lane. As I get closer, I see an extremely large wolf-like thing. But it's the size of a human, but it's on all fours. Its mouth is open like 5 times more than a wolf could open its mouth. As I passed it, I noticed how big this thing was, like its head was in line with my roof of my car. Its head turned and followed me as I passed. I was going much slower due to almost hitting the coyote just a mile back. This thing was huge. After I passed it, I thought about turning around, but I felt, screw this, I'm going to keep going. I was a little freaked out all the way to Page. I stopped in a gas station there and couldn't get it off my mind. So I asked the cashier if they had crazy big wolves around here, and she said no. I've lived here on the res my whole life. Why do you ask? I then explained what had just happened, and she replied, was it on 2 legs or 4? I said, kind of 4 legs, at which point she said she didn't want to hear any more and rang my shit up and pushed me out my way. She was clearly freaked out by what I had seen. I brought my story up to a coworker a few weeks later, and they were like, what the fuck? That was a skinwalker. They talked about all the sightings in the area and people they knew that had investigated them. Honestly, I'm not sure if I would ever travel that area at night again. All of my life till I was 18, I lived in a town called Wells in northeastern Nevada. A small town, population of 1,000, so all of my outdoor activities involved being outdoors. From when I was 13 to 15, I saved enough money to buy an HK91. My dad bought it for me, $2,761.44. From then on, it went everywhere I did in the woods. When I got my driver's license, it meant I could go roaming around. My 1972 Toyota Land Cruiser with a Chevy 350 for the close stuff. I got 5 miles per gallon on a 10-gallon tank, or my 72 Dodge W200 with a 36 and a 20-gallon tank. So anything outside of the line of sight, I took my Dodge. One weekend, I decided to explore around the Ruby Marshes and go into the Ruby Mountains around there, right around old Fort Ruby, a fort that was built in 1860 to serve as an outpost for the Pony Express. I went into the mountains north of it and checked out some pretty cool terrain and old mine sites. When I was going down the road, I noticed some overgrown tracks that went into the canyon and decided to make it into a Nevada highway to follow them. I followed it for about 5 miles or so, and the road got better. It was graded well and continued on, except for the fact that there was a tree about 3 feet in diameter blocking the road. Beyond that, it looked pretty cool, so I decided to get out on foot and check it out. After the tree, the road went straight for about 100 yards, then sharply rounded to the right. Went about another 100 yards, then hooked left, going to a mining cabin and a windmill at the top of the ridge. The side after where it hooks right is limestone next to the road with a ridge, a constant 100 yards or so from the road. Because of how I was raised and my newfound fondness for my 91, I went everywhere in the hills on foot armed. I had my 91 slung on my chest and 5 mags in a cheap Korean nylon bandolier. My USP-45 my dad bought for me was also in a cheap Ace brand drop leg holster. I parked my Dodge and set out past the tree. As soon as I crossed it, it immediately seemed weird. Anyone who has been out in the woods knows that there is always noise. When I parked my truck, you could hear the birds singing and the cicadas and other bugs buzzing about. As soon as I crossed the tree on the road, it went silent. I kept walking up and didn't see any bugs or anything moving. As I went up, I felt uneasy, as if something was watching me the entire time. On the way up, I noticed most of the pines on the hill were broken off about 10 feet or so, and many of the limestone rocks had chunks missing like someone punched a hole in the sheetrock. I made it up to the cabin, and it was pretty screwed up. Huge holes in the exterior, walls knocked down. Even for its age, it looked way too screwed up. I checked it out and found nothing recent, so I went to the windmill. In the windmill, there was a hollow shaft going down that was filled with water. I went up to the ridge to the shaft, and it was intact, like it was just run a day before. Right above it, there were 4 huge piles of rocks, making a rectangle. Within there were mounds made of rocks. When I passed a pile of rock, the wind kicked up. It got downright cold. I felt like I was being watched, so I decided I should leave. The whole time I was walking back to the truck, I felt like something was watching me. Once I got back on the road, I kept hearing something following me on the ridgeline. When I moved, it moved. I stopped, it stopped. I thought maybe I was imagining until the rock slid down from the ridge. As I rounded the bend, I heard footsteps on the ridge pick up, and I decided it was time to shoot. Whatever it was had dashed between the cedars to a lonely pine, 20 yards in either direction for cover. Fuck that, I dumped all 20 rounds of my 91 into the tree. Anyone who has shot an animal knows the difference between a thump on wood and a thwack of an animal. I heard 5 or so thwacks at the end, followed by a blood-curdling howl. I dumped the empty mag on the ground and slapped a new one in and ran. I felt like the whole forest was coming down on me. I saw things move from the trees, from my peripheral. I tried to jump across the tree and ate shit and rolled into the bumper. All of a sudden, I could hear the birds and the bugs again. I got back up and looked behind the tree to see something resembling an upright wolf standing about 60 feet from me behind the fallen tree. Its eyes were red in the daylight, and when I looked at it for a moment, I knew I shouldn't be there. I broke out of it and shot the mag of my 91 at it, most which I knew made no sound, and it just turned towards me. I shot 5 rounds from my USP at it and saw that it had no effect. That's when I decided it was time to leave. On my way back to town, I made a 3-hour trip into a 1-hour trip. Once I got back to town, no one believed me. A few weeks later, I talked to a friend of mine who was an elder Indian and told him what I experienced. He asked me where I was, and I told him. He said I went into sacred burial grounds. This was the single most screwed up thing I had ever experienced. The few I have told don't believe me, and I don't care. All I know is that it happened to me. I'll never go back there alone. My wife and I were driving through Zion National Park, late evening September, about 11 years ago. It just started getting dark. The huge, sheer bluffs were awesome, very eerie at night, silhouetted with the full moon in the sky. We finally wound our way through the park and were hoping the exit was near so we could leave the park and check into our hotel. About 9:45, we were still in the park, driving slightly downhill at about 40 miles an hour. Out of nowhere, there's this very hairy, flat-faced thing that ran up to the passenger side window that my wife was on. The curly and dense fur coloring was very dark, almost black. It was inches from the passenger side window. It was bipedal and was around 5.5 feet tall. What I remember most was the huge yellow eyes. They were wide open. It stayed next to the window for a few seconds, then it vanished. My wife and I both got a long look at it. It didn't have a snout like a bighorn sheep or a mule deer, which are plenty in the park. We had seen both animals early that evening. Remember that we're driving about 40 miles an hour. There's no way a weirdo in a costume could hop out of the side of the road and keep up with our vehicle for 3 or 4 seconds at that speed. I told no one for years. I researched Bigfoot in Zion, as I didn't know what else to search for. No luck there. I told my brother about the whole deal a few years later, and he turned white. He asked if I had ever heard of a skinwalker. Of course I hadn't. Then I looked up what they were. The eyewitness stories in the Southwest people tell pretty much mirror my story in almost every way. Unflattable beast running alongside your vehicle. The closest landmark would be Big Bend Viewpoint. Today's 7th encounter. About 3 years ago, spring, riding a remote single-track, 10-foot wide dirt road in the hollers of eastern Oklahoma. These are the Ozark foothills on a somewhat quiet dual-sport motorcycle. This is remote for our area, heavily wooded hills and hollers and cattle ranches. This road winds along the bottom of a steep, heavily wooded hill east, with a thickly vegetated creek along the bottom. The creek sat about 8 feet below the road, and small patches of cattle pasture to the west. Headed south and just crested a slight rise in the road. 50 yards ahead, I spotted a dark brown object moving quickly west, towards the creek drop-off. I caught sight of it when it was about 7 or 8 feet across the 10-foot road. It appeared to bend over as it made its way across the road into heavy foliage. I thought I caught it striding, and then it bent down and to clear the trees. From my perspective, the thing's lower half or 2/3 body was obscured by the slight rise in the road. It was on a down slope on the backside. I was like, whoa, what the fuck was that? I pulled up to the exact spot and stared into the lower creek area. I'm talking like seconds later. I know there were cattle around, but this was no cow. With how low the spot was in relation to the rise in the road, I saw it behind. It actually ducked. I know there are bears, but it was again too low behind the rise. I checked for tracks, but it had been dry and the road and area was rocky gravel dirt. I'm 6'3", and whatever this was had to be at least my height, probably 6 inches taller, in regards to where it crossed behind the rise and my vantage point. I sat there for minutes as I was computing this, and the statistical odds told me what I expected. Whatever it was had to be within yards of me. No cow, no bear, no movement. I was alone, and at least a mile or 2 from the nearest ranch. I thought better, and I left. I laughingly call the road Monkey Holler now. Today's 8th part of the upload. There's a legend here that
isn't that old, of a woman that was found dead in the woods by hunters that had the body of a human and the head of a dog or wolf creature. The body was slightly decomposed, but the bone structure was there. It was said to be one of two things. Either a person that was deformed, but the family that used to live in the nearby house had kept her away from society. And when they died off, she was on her own and scavenged until she died. Or some creature from wherever. As was the case, there was a family graveyard on the abandoned grounds. The hunters buried her in this graveyard. Now, this would have been the very late 1890s to 1910 when it was discovered. My grandfather on my father's side said he had heard about the discovery, but wasn't here to see it since he was in Monroe, North Carolina, and didn't move here until after he got back from World War I. He moved here in 1920 or thereabouts. Now, here's the thing. There wasn't much of a town here at the time this was found. Almost everything was farmland or woods. The town started with the mills, and with Duke Power putting in a dam, which was around 1900. In digging and doing things necessary to build houses and things a little further out, where it used to be wooded, where the remains of the old house were. They had to dig up the graveyard and rebury the bodies in the graveyard in town. This would have been around the late 30s. Now, my dad, born in 1929, several other people his age, and my grandfather, and some the old men in town swear to have witnessed seeing the body. People were freaked out all over town about it. My dad says he and a bunch of his close friends swear to have seen it as it was being transferred. It would make sense for him to have seen it. The house they lived in at the time was right across from the cemetery, and the undertaker was right next door. In fact, the house that he lived in then is now the Dantzler Baker Funeral Home, as my grandfather sold the home to them in the early 70s, when he moved out to the river. My dad says that, of course, as a kid, he and his friends, along with so many superstitious people back then, believed it to be a werewolf or a creature like that. He says as he got older, he became more and more convinced of the other possibility. The people that owned the property of the old house graveyard were fairly wealthy, but the last couple had only a couple of kids who either died or moved away. He thinks this girl was deformed, and being so was never brought into town or talked about. That's the way people did things back then, even going so far as hiding people like that in the basement for life. He thought the parents likely got too old to care for her and died off. The girl, being scared to come into town because of her disfigurement, lived as long as she could off the land surrounded by the home. He also figured the dog-face shape was not as profound in life as it appeared after it had been decomposed, since the bone structure would be more apparent. Strange things happen, and do think that most of these mythical creatures are based in some reality. Some may have been real, and now extinct. Some may have been disfigured humans or other animals. Well, I'm going to step in on that one, Chapo. I think your daddy saw a Dogman, not a disfigured little girl. This isn't the movie The Mask with Cher. This was straight up a Dogman. Today's ninth encounter. One thing that I've heard all 49 years of my life is that if you see a Dogman, shoot it in the face immediately, like Han Solo and Vader. They are never peaceful. Now my brother and his friend, now a very respected lawman, were hunting over Thanksgiving scraps one night for coyotes. My brother swears he made the best shot in his life on a running target and killed a big hyena-type animal with a Bolt 270 with a 130 grain Nosler ballistic tip. Both said it had to weigh around 200 pounds, maybe more, maybe less. They did say it was heavy on the front end, sloped on the butt. They said it was running away with the remains of the carved-up Thanksgiving turkey in its mouth on the flat of the gas rig setup. His friend totally backed his story up as a full witness, and he was holding the light. This was in the valley of our deer hunting land in the mountains. No one's ever seen a Sasquatch down there with a snout and a head like that. He said that it moved very fast, dropped like a rock with a high shoulder shot, and was dead when they walked up to it. They were so spooked by it, they left it where it lay. It made no sounds when it ran or died. This would have been around 1990. We never really figured out if it was an escaped hyena from an exotic home somewhere. There were no houses for miles where this happened in the mountains. Some of my friends really think he shot a Dogman. It was not there the next morning when they went to look for it and get pictures. I found a big pool of blood and a mashed up grass, but no animal. I have no idea, but I know to this day my brother and his friends still talk about that hyena thing. Just repeating what I've heard. My brother refuses to even discuss the topic of Sasquatch. He's a huge outdoorsman like me. But he won't go into our woods before dark now and doesn't take a flashlight with him because he doesn't want to see what's out there in the dark. And he knows we will come to his spot if he shoots in the evening or if we don't hear him coming off the mountain. He's very freaked out by even the thought of something else being in the woods, especially with the vocals we hear at night. He and my father have a shut-off valve about what we have roaming in the mountains. If they ever see it, I don't think they would ever go into the woods again. They love the mountains and hunting, so they just refuse to process the thought of anything being out there, besides deer, turkey, hog, and the rare bear.
And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed today's bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you, and I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.